Adrienne Burke. I am really excited to be here today and really appreciate Sarah inviting me to participate in Dismantle Preservation. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for us to have conversations that I think a lot of us have been wanting to have for a long time. So really glad to be a part of it. A little bit about me. I am saying hello to you all virtually from Miami, Florida. I moved here at the beginning of March, just in time for the pandemic, and started a new job. So it's been really interesting. I work for Miami-Dade County. I work partially in the Office of Historic Preservation and partially with our long-range planning section, working with our comprehensive plan. So I wear two hats in that area. Previously, I served as planning director for Nassau County, Florida, which is the northernmost county on the east coast of Florida. I also worked as director of a neighborhood historic preservation nonprofit organization in Jacksonville, Florida, and previously served as community development director for a town in Nassau County, Fernandina Beach, which is on Amelia Island. So I've been privileged to work in some really cool places. I'm a graduate of the University of Florida's preservation program and law school, and an undergraduate degree in history from UVA. So I have lots of education. None of it is related to finance. So big disclaimer on this presentation, I'm not a financial advisor. I know nothing about finance other than my own experiences. But I think what qualified me to give this talk is I have a whole bunch of student debt, a whole bunch. And Sarah knew that I had recently had some success with the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. So I will talk about that today. The fact that it is a real program, although I had my doubts during stages of that process, which I'll talk about. So yeah, I'm not an expert, but I am a debtor, a six-figure debtor. And I'm not alone in that. So I pulled some stats yesterday because I was just curious. I hadn't seen anything recently on the average debt that people carry, but according to an article I found yesterday, and also a disclaimer, I only looked at one article, so this could vary. Average undergraduate debt is $29,200. Average student loan debt across graduate programs, not including undergraduate debt, is $71,000. That of course varies by program, whether you go to a public school or a private school. And then the programs in particular, master's program average debt is $62,800, and professional program average debt is $183,200. So I mentioned I did a joint degree for my graduate program. I did law school, which is a professional program, and a master's degree. So I am one of those healthy six-figure debt people. And I have to say, actually, it's less than that now because of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, but that is something that I'm very familiar with. So you're not alone. If you're carrying debt, or if you're looking to go back to school, you will not be alone. This talk isn't going to talk about how crazy that is, that this is our educational system and that that's what we have to do in order to pursue higher education. It is what it is at the moment. I don't have answers for that today, but it is obviously, in my opinion, crazy that that's our system. And especially, I'll touch upon a little bit the fact that so many of our entry-level jobs in our field in preservation have a preference for master's degrees. So you're kind of starting right out of the gate with this saddle on your back, so to speak. So that is my intro. Let me share my screen. I do have just a few slides I'll share with you guys. So yeah, this is an homage to one of my very favorite bands, Rage Against the Machine. And, talking about the craziness of our system, I think we certainly all can experience some collective rage that's the system and the machine that we're working with. And it is a machine. These are companies for the most part, or they're the federal government, but it is a machine. The staggering amount of student debt in the country is a crisis that I wish got more political attention. And so, yeah, that's what we're here to talk about today. I do want to give a shout out to this idea in preservation. I've seen it circulating, especially recently, a lot lately, and some of the sessions this morning might have touched upon it. Unfortunately, I had to miss them. But you know, there's this idea that our field really privileges the educated, and while our professional positions do require some level of either undergraduate or graduate level degree, you know, we really as a field should be giving credence to those people who are stewards of their community history, who have innate knowledge of their community, having been part of it for a long time, potentially for generations. And, you know, I think there's a lot we can do in our field to elevate those voices in a way that is not just centering those of us who happen to have been fortunate enough, even with a lot of debt, to go to school for these programs. We don't have all the answers. Just because we have a degree doesn't mean we know everything. And so I just use my little soapbox here to say, let's center some voices, even if they don't have a whole bunch of initials after their name, like I do, which is a lot, but that's something I think is really important for us to remember. So that being said, I'm going to just do some high-level topics here, but spend some time on the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. From the questions I saw, that really seemed like that was a lot of the interest from people who were interested in attending today. So I will definitely talk about that. But these are just some high-level things here I'm going to talk about. So shame and debt, this is where I'm going to start out. It's a nod in part to the session coming up this afternoon about mental health and preservation. And this is certainly something in terms of a conference that I think is unique. You know, it's not a lot of preservation conferences or professional conferences in general where you see people talking about mental health. But that of course impacts how we do our job and what we bring to the table every day. And so with a nod to this afternoon's session, but also in part because I don't know if I would have been able to do this talk even 2 years ago. I had a lot of shame around my debt and how much debt I had. Even though it's average, my debt is not abnormal, especially for professional programs. I had a really hard time acknowledging and being vocal about it, or even talking about it at all. So I just wanted to start this presentation by saying, you know, that's not strange. It's hard to talk about money, especially, you know, depending on your family circumstances, et cetera. There can be a lot of feeling that goes into having a lot of debt or any debt. And so I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that and say that if you're like me, you know, it's okay. And I see you, I'm with you. We are not our debt. We're not our choices we made around that debt. We do the best we can at the time with the information we have. And of course, Brene Brown is a huge speaker about shame. And this is one of her quotes, you know, when you say it out loud, it can't survive that. Shame can't survive being acknowledged, and cannot survive empathy. So I'm with you if you're experiencing this too. It's not easy. It certainly doesn't feel like it some of the time that we aren't our debt. It feels like that. And it definitely impacts our life choices, which I'll talk about. But it's not us, it's not who we are. So I just wanted to start with that. So going into that though, debt as a deterrent. Obviously, you know, one of the big things, and I don't have it on here specifically listed because it seems so apparent, but obviously higher education, the costs of higher education is an enormous deterrent for people who want to enter our field. And to the extent that you are a person who either doesn't have the family resources, doesn't have the knowledge of how to take loans or have credit. Credit is a huge part of it. There are a lot of people who might be interested in joining our field professionally with these credentials that the cost of education is a huge deterrent, and that could be impacting the wealth of voices we could have contributing to our field, whether, you know, regardless of someone's background, it's limiting the diversity of our field, certainly. So that's an enormous deterrent, obviously. Again, I don't have answers for that, but I just think it needs to be acknowledged that that is a problem. We will continue to have similar voices if only certain people can access the education. So with that being said, that's kind of, you know, the main thing, education. You might not even be able to get your foot in the door if you're not able to pay for it. And that's a huge, huge problem. Jobs. Debt is certainly a deterrent to taking jobs. As I mentioned, and most of you I'm sure are familiar with, master's degrees are preferred for a lot of our professional opportunities. And, you know, depending on, and the salary, the starting salaries for most of those positions are not great. So my first position out of grad school, I had 6 figures of debt. My first position paid $48,000. And I thought that was great. I was so excited because I thought that was more than I was expecting for going into an entry-level planning position. It was extremely hard to live on $48,000 with functionally a mortgage payment for a student loan payment. I had a rent payment, and I actually paid more for my student loan payment at that time than I paid for my rent. So it was really hard. That is a major deterrent to accepting jobs. And it's a reality. And so when I talk about some of the things to think about in terms of either going back to school or managing your debt, hopefully I'll have a couple of ideas for that. But I just, at this stage, acknowledging, yes, major deterrent. Professional organizations, that's something that I did not realize actually until this year, how spoiled I was. Up until this year, and I've been working in the field over 10 years, about 12 years at this point. I've been really lucky to have employers who paid for my professional organizations. So I'm a member of the American Planning Association. I'm an AICP certified planner, which I also just did a couple years ago. I'm a member of the Florida Bar. I am a licensed attorney, although I don't practice. That one I've always paid for myself because I don't work as an attorney. But yeah, APA, National Trust, different organizations. I was really fortunate that my jobs paid for those. But that might not be the case. And I'm actually now in a position where they don't. And so I'm having to pay that myself. Those are hefty fees potentially that you have to take on. So if you also have a lot of student debt, it might impact your ability to participate more meaningfully in those organizations as a member. That's one thing that I learned recently, that, you know, that's an expense now that I have to take on. So that is something to think about too. And then the last one is boards. This also was something I learned personally. A lot of our nonprofit boards in preservation or history, I won't say a lot, that's a generalization, but it is possible that some of those boards have a dollar amount requirement for you to be a member of that board that you have to donate. That's a huge deterrent. Sometimes it's, you know, $1,500, $3,000. It's not cheap. I have a lot of strong opinions about that in terms of how much that makes our nonprofit board diversity diverse or not. But that's also something to think about. You know, I was a member of a board and that had a donation requirement, and I was very vocal when they asked me to participate that I was not going to be able to pay that. I could donate my time and my talent, but my treasure wasn't going to happen because my student loans would preclude that. I paid so much monthly in student loan payments. So that's something to think about too. That's an area perhaps to, just be mindful of. If someone asks you to be on a board, or if you're interested in being on a board, ask them about that requirement. Ask how flexible it is, and, advocate and be vocal about the fact that that might not work for you. That's what I did. So, and I was lucky that they were willing to work with me, and I gave a lot of time, and I helped raise money in other ways, but I didn't personally donate that much because I couldn't. So those are just some of the deterrents to think about with loans. So lessons learned, and again, this isn't rocket science, and I'm not a financial advisor. I've learned most of my lessons from mistakes, honestly. I didn't come from a family that taught me how to budget or taught me anything about finances, really. I was fortunate that for my family, the deal was my undergraduate degree was something my parents would help me with, and I went to an in-state school. But if I wanted to pursue anything after that, I was on my own. And I was on my own. I did not get any guidance or input on the loan process, taking out loans, what it would mean after I graduated. It was trial and error for me. So my first bit of advice, and this might not apply if you're already in the same boat as me, you've already been there, done that, you have the debt. But if you're thinking about going back to school, I would strongly encourage you to seek guidance. Ask friends if you don't have family who can do it. If you have family, great. Colleagues, people you respect or look up to, and schools. I know some schools do have better credit and loan counseling than others. But yeah, seek guidance. Really, I wish at the beginning of my career in school, someone had really sat down with me and said, if you take out this amount of money, here's the loan payments you're going to be looking at when you graduate. And I'm sure those resources existed. I just didn't know, and I didn't know where to look. And so, really do yourself a favor and educate yourself. I had no idea when I graduated. I don't know what I was thinking, but I just had no idea that I would be paying basically a mortgage payment's worth of loan payments every month. And it's easy to do that because when you're in school, you don't pay. So it's sort of just like, it's coming, but it was a big wake-up call for me. So definitely seek advice. There are loan calculators out there now. There might have been at the time, but that's something you can do to look at some of those payments. Budgeting, obviously, that's like financial planning basics 101. To be honest, still not something I'm really great about, but I've learned a lot. If you're looking at going back to school, you could always try to save in advance. You can stick to a budget while you're in school, something I do wish I had done, and be frugal. I'm not great at that in general, but that's something that certainly would help keep the amount of loans down. For example, for me, it was really important for me to live by myself. I just knew because I was going to be working so hard in school, I needed to live by myself. So, if I'd had roommates, I probably could have saved money, but you have to make your choices at the time. And then be strategic. So if you are thinking about going back to school, or maybe you just have an undergraduate degree, look for jobs that have reimbursement programs if work and school is something you think you can do at the same time. So I know, for example, in local government, that's where most of my career has been. We still have reimbursement programs. And so if you're looking to do a graduate degree related to your job, they will reimburse or pay for the programs. And if you're willing to be patient and take time, a lot of preservation programs, urban planning programs are online now. That is definitely an option that I've seen people do, and they make it work, and they graduate without debt because of it. So that's something to think about. And I will say, I was in a position of hiring for many years, and I personally, in the urban planning world, so looking at it from local government planning perspective, I would have preferred to see someone with just an undergraduate degree and a lot of customer service experience. than someone with a master's degree who had never actually worked with the public. So just, things like that, keep in mind. There can be a lot said for getting an undergraduate degree and then going into work, looking for work that has those opportunities to pay for your education. So something to think about. Okay, public service loan forgiveness. And how am I on time? Ooh, I've been talking a lot. Okay, I will go through this quickly. This is something people definitely seemed interested in. I graduated from school, both my degrees, I graduated in 2007, and that's when the public service loan forgiveness program was implemented. So when I started working full-time in 2008, this was still a new program. There was not a lot of information about it. They hadn't worked out all the rules yet. It was kind of a mystery. So by the time I actually got the information on what I had to do, I'd already been working for probably a year or two even. So I lost those couple of years to participate because they didn't even have the rules yet. So anyway, I'll go through the rules really quickly. If you might be familiar with them already, but there are 5 major things that you have to do to participate in this program. So one is be employed for government or nonprofit. This includes government at any level, and it includes nonprofit 501c3s. It also can potentially include nonprofits that are not 501c3s, but are still tax exempt, but they have to meet certain criteria. So that's something to look at. You do have to work full time. That was something, someone asked a question about being a 1099 employee. Yeah, from what it looks like, no, they're not going to take 1099 contractors. I don't have a good answer for that, aside from reach out to your legislators and encourage them to consider looking at ways to change these rules. But right now, it's full-time W-2 employees. Full-time is either the employer's definition or working at least 30 hours a week. And if you do part-time jobs, you can combine them to create that average of 30 hours a week. So if you work for 2 nonprofits, for example, that's something that qualifies. Have direct loans. This was another couple questions about this came up. Yes, it's a specific loan program. So if you consolidate your federal loans into a private lender, you're not going to be eligible anymore. You have to have loans received under the William D. Ford Federal Direct Loan Program, and you have to reconsolidate them into a new federal direct consolidated loan. So it is very specific, the type of loans that are eligible. That's really the first step. That's the first thing I did. I consolidated my federal loans. And again, this is only federal loans. So if you have private student loans, which I also have plenty of, that does not apply under this program. This is only your federal student loans. You have to put those loans then into an income-driven repayment plan. And there are several types of those plans. You can work on which is the best for you, but has to be under one of those plans. And then you have to make 120 payments, which is 10 years. For me, like I said, because I started the program a little after it was created, for me, it was actually like 12 years that I was paying before I was eligible. But that's also something to remember. This is something also I did not really realize until I was ready to apply, but this is really, really important, and I don't think they've highlighted enough. You have to still be working for government, nonprofit, full-time at the time you apply. So even if you've already made your 120 payments, don't quit and take that private sector job. You have to still be working for that organization or a qualifying organization at the time you apply and at the time you receive forgiveness. So that's something I think people need to really be aware of that I didn't know until I went to apply and started really looking at it. So don't quit your job after 10 years. Stay until you get the forgiveness because that's really important.
Adrienne, can you
Yeah.
talk about your experience submitting the yearly public service loan forgiveness certification forms?
Yeah, so I was just about to go into the process. So, and that was one of the questions too. I will also, just as a heads up, go in and answer all the questions for everyone in that Google Doc if I don't get to it in time. But yeah, one of the questions was the process of certifying. So there are forms online. You can certify your income every year or your payments so that they know you're participating. I did that annually, just went ahead and did it. I certified annually, and then I certified when I changed jobs again. So that might have even been, doing it twice in a year, but I did it anyway. I will say, however, they recommend doing that. But this is my, the slide says it is a real program. It was an ordeal, but it works. When I went to go apply, I had done my 120 payments. You can ask for a determination of eligibility. I was determined eligible to apply. It was an ordeal to actually go through the process of getting the forgiveness. All I can say is be persistent. I can't tell you how many phone calls I had to make. I got multiple denials on my submittals. I got different answers every time I called. My loans are serviced by Fed Loan Servicing. And I truly did get so frustrated, like some of you in the comments who were saying, is this even a real program? I had my doubts because of some of the questions they were asking me. At one point, I had someone challenging how I actually signed my name. They asked me if that was even a real signature. I mean, that was the level of challenge I was getting on the stuff I was submitting. It was very frustrating. I kept a record of everything, every phone call I made, every time I got a correspondence from them. I would say I was denied 6 times. And it was always over some picky thing on the forms. But I just kept going. I was very close to writing my congressional representative because I was so frustrated. But I finally, got someone on the phone who actually seemed willing to help me and work through it. So I am very proud to say that as of a couple months ago, all of my federal student loans have been forgiven. It is a real program. It works. And I literally still just yesterday went on the website to make sure it still said I didn't have a balance because I sort of was so skeptical of it. But it's true. I don't have a balance. So it is a real program. Do the steps, make it work. But it was really annoying. It took months for me to get them to accept something finally. Oh, and the reason I say about the certification, even though I did that every year and every time I changed jobs, they made me resubmit all of it again. So I had to go back to my old employers and get it again. But then the next time I called, they told me I didn't have to do that. So that's the kind of stuff you're going to deal with. It was very aggravating, but I don't know if they do that on purpose to see how much you're willing to put up with. But it was an ordeal, but it works. It is a real program. Here's my contact information. I want to say, I know we're getting close to time. I'm happy to answer any questions at any point about anything, my experience. If there's any, if you have questions about anything related to student loans, I'm happy to try and help figure it out, even if I don't know the answer. And with that, I will turn it back over to Sarah. I don't know if we have time for a couple questions, but like I said,
Adrienne, we'll do one question. We've gotten a number of them about loan consolidation, wanting just a bit more information about that.
Sure. So loan consolidation, to be honest with you, I do not remember how exactly I went about the federal student loan consolidation process. Like I said, I was only interested in the federal direct loan consolidation because I wanted to be in that program for forgiveness. So if that's what you're interested in, that's the only one you can look at. And that's on the federal student aid websites. Private student loans, I did also consolidate my private student loans through LendKey. That's one of the consolidation companies. I will say during the recession, most places were not reconsolidating private student loans. It was not something they were doing, but luckily they are again. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely worth it. I felt because I was able to get a fixed rate. So I no longer have a variable interest rate. I have a fixed rate. And so my student loan payment is the same always until I pay it off. And that was really important to me. So I recommend that for private student loans for sure.
That's great. I know that a half hour really wasn't enough to talk about student loans, so I would like to encourage all of the people attending this session. This isn't a session that I've personally seen at a preservation conference, but it's a session that I think we all need, or a topic that we all need to be having conversations about. So I would like to encourage you all to encourage your statewide conference organizers, the national conference organizers, to consider having this type of session on student loans and the debt burden and the shame associated with it at one of their conference. And if they don't believe people were interested for it, I can tell you that around 300 people were viewing this. So the proof is in the numbers. We need to have this conversation. We're going to have a half-hour break, and at 1, we're going to learn about unions. We're also going to have a conversation this afternoon on mental health, and definitely don't miss the research to action session this afternoon. And then we have lightning talks to close out the day with a cocktail or a tasty non-alcoholic beverage of your choice. So thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Sarah.